It was a quiet evening in the city. Daniel sat on his old sofa eating noodles from a cheap plastic cup. The television flickered with late-night news, but he was not really watching. His small apartment felt heavy with silence. Outside, the street below buzzed with faint traffic, a few horns, the distant hum of life. Inside, Daniel just wanted the night to pass. Then came the knock. It was soft at first. 3 slow taps on the wooden door. Daniel froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. No one ever knocked at this hour. He lived alone, and he had no friends who would come by uninvited. He waited, thinking maybe it was his imagination. But then came another knock, louder, more urgent. Daniel put down the noodles and stood up. His heart began to beat faster. He walked carefully toward the door, his steps light on the floorboards. He leaned closer, pressing his ear against the door. For a moment there was only silence. Then a faint voice, shaky, tired, almost broken. "Please, open, please." The voice was female, but strange. The words sounded human, yet something in the tone felt off. It was too soft, too controlled, as if every word was carefully shaped. Daniel's fingers trembled on the doorknob. He opened the door just a crack. There she was. A woman stood in the dim light of the hallway. Her clothes were torn, dirty, and clung to her thin frame. Her hair was tangled, sticking to her face as if she had been walking for days. Her skin looked pale, almost glowing faintly under the yellow light bulb. And her eyes were large, too large, reflecting the light like the eyes of an animal in the dark. She looked straight at him. "I only have $3, please. Let me shower at your home, human." Daniel's blood ran cold. The way she said human, slow, deliberate, like it was not her natural word, made him step back. He studied her face again. Yes, she looked like a woman, but something was wrong. Something in her cheekbones, the way her lips moved, even the curve of her neck. She was close to human, but not perfect. Who are you?" Daniel asked. His voice came out thin. She lowered her head, holding out her shaking hand. In her palm lay 3 wrinkled, dirty dollar bills. She clutched them tightly as if they were gold. "I can pay. I only need water." "Just water, please." Daniel stared. His apartment was messy, small, barely enough for him. And now this stranger, this not quite human woman, was at his door begging for a shower. His first thought was to slam the door shut, lock it, pretend this never happened, but he couldn't move. Her voice carried something heavy, something desperate. She looked fragile, but her eyes told a different story. Behind the exhaustion, there was a strength that made Daniel uneasy. It was as if she was holding back, hiding something deeper. The hallway light flickered, buzzing faintly. For 1 second, Daniel thought he saw strange marks glowing faintly on her arms. Lines, almost like symbols. But when he blinked, they were gone. "What happened to you?" he whispered. She shook her head quickly. "No time, they will follow, please, only a shower." "I will leave, they will follow?" The words repeated in Daniel's mind. Who were they? His hand tightened on the doorknob. Every part of his mind screamed danger. Yet his chest ached with another feeling, pity. Whoever she was in pain. Why me? Daniel asked carefully. She lifted her head. For the first time he saw her face fully. The dirt and sweat could not hide her features. She was strange, yes, but also beautiful in a way that was not human. Her eyes glimmered like liquid silver. "Because you opened the door," she said simply. The words sank deep into Daniel's chest. He looked down at the 3 crumpled bills in her hand. She was serious. She truly thought a few dollars could buy safety. He almost laughed, but the fear in her trembling hands killed the sound before it left his throat. The hallway felt colder now. He glanced left and right, half expecting to see someone waiting in the shadows. But there was no one. Only her. Daniel's mind raced. If she was dangerous, letting her in would be the worst mistake of his life. If she was not, closing the door would be the cruelest thing he had ever done. The silence stretched. She stood there swaying slightly, her breath ragged. Her lips moved again, a whisper so soft he barely caught it. "They are near." Daniel's heart pounded. He knew then that he had to choose. With a deep breath, he unlocked the chain, opened the door wider, and stepped aside. "Come in," he said quietly. The woman's shoulders relaxed just slightly, as if the weight of the world had lifted for one brief second. She stepped past him into the dim light of his apartment. The smell of dirt and metal followed her. Daniel closed the door behind her, the lock clicking into place. And in that moment, he realized his life had just changed forever. The stranger steps, and Daniel watched her cross the threshold as if she was stepping into a different world. The woman's bare feet made no sound on the floor. She moved carefully, almost too carefully, like every step was measured. Her head turned slowly, eyes scanning the tiny apartment with strange intensity, as if each object mattered. The door shut behind them with a soft click, but the silence that followed felt heavier than before. Daniel stood awkwardly near the door, watching her. He had let her in, but his body was still tense, ready to run if things turned bad. The woman stopped in the middle of the room. Her thin shoulders lifted as she breathed in deeply, her chest rising and falling as though the simple act of being indoors brought her relief. "Safe," she whispered, almost to herself. Daniel frowned. "Safe from who?" She did not answer. Instead, she looked at the crumpled bills in her hand, then at him. Slowly, she stretched her arm forward. The dirty notes shook slightly between her fingers. "Payment," she said softly. Daniel didn't take them. His eyes narrowed. "Keep it. $3 won't even buy soap here." She blinked as if the words confused her. "Not about value. It is all I have." For a moment, Daniel almost felt guilty. She looked fragile, almost breakable, but he couldn't shake the uneasiness in his stomach. She was too calm for someone who claimed to be in danger. Too watchful. His apartment was small. One couch, one old table, and a narrow hallway leading to the bathroom. She moved toward it slowly, dragging her tired body like every step cost her energy, but her movement still had that strange, controlled grace, like she was stronger than she wanted him to know. "Wait," Daniel said sharply. "What's your name?" She turned, her silver-like eyes reflecting the weak light from the ceiling bulb. "Names are not safe." That's not an answer. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then call me nothing. Or call me what humans call the lost." Daniel's mouth felt dry. He didn't know what that meant, but the way she said humans again sent a shiver through him. She stepped closer to the bathroom door. Daniel hesitated, then walked after her, standing in the doorway as she reached for the knob. "Listen," he said, his voice low. "I don't know what game you're playing, but if you do anything strange in there, I swear." Her head tilted and her smile faded. "If I wanted harm, human, you would already be gone." The words chilled him. She said them without threat, without anger, just as if stating a fact. Daniel stepped back, his throat tight. "Fine, shower, but that's it. After you leave." She nodded once, then slipped into the bathroom and shut the door. The apartment fell quiet again, but the sound of rushing water soon filled the silence. Daniel leaned against the wall, staring at the door as steam began to seep out from under it. He tried to think clearly, but nothing about this night made sense. Why him? Why his door? And why did she speak like someone from another place entirely? The water ran steady, but then Daniel caught something strange, soft sounds like a chant. At first he thought she was singing, but as he pressed his ear against the door, he realized it wasn't any language he knew. The syllables were sharp, rising and falling in patterns that felt old and powerful. His stomach tightened. He should not be listening, but he couldn't stop. The light above the hallway flickered. The pipes groaned. The air seemed warmer, heavier. He pulled back from the door, breathing hard. After what felt like forever, the chanting stopped. The shower cut off. Silence returned. The knob turned. Daniel straightened quickly, his fists clenching at his sides. The door opened slowly, steam rolling out like fog. She stepped out, her skin damp, her hair slicked back from her face. For the first time, he could see her clearly. Her skin was pale but faintly luminous, almost like moonlight had touched it. The strange marks he thought he'd imagined earlier were now visible, thin, glowing lines running along her arms, curving like symbols. Daniel's chest tightened. What is that?" She looked down at her arms as if she had forgotten the marks were there. Her expression darkened. "You saw too much," she said quietly. Daniel backed up, his pulse quickening. "What are you?" Her eyes locked on his, and for a long moment she didn't speak. Then she sighed, her voice carrying a weight that made the small room feel colder. "Not from here." The words hung between them, simple, direct, but heavy enough to crush the silence. Daniel's knees felt weak. He wanted to laugh, to call her crazy, but the glowing marks burned like proof before his eyes. He swallowed hard. "If you're not from here, then why me? Why my door?" Her gaze softened slightly. "Because you opened it. No one else would." Daniel's heart raced. He felt like he was standing at the edge of something vast, something he didn't understand. He had let a stranger into his home, but now she was more than that. She was not human, and whatever hunted her was real. The city noise outside continued as if nothing had changed, but for Daniel everything had, and as he stared at her glowing arms, he knew one thing for sure. His life was no longer his own. The reveal in the bathroom, Daniel couldn't stop staring at the glowing lines that ran down her arms. They weren't tattoos. They weren't scars. They looked alive, shifting faintly like they were breathing with her skin. The faint blue-white glow filled the dim hallway, and Daniel felt like he was standing in front of something that should not exist. The woman, this strange visitor, folded her arms across her chest, hiding the markings. She tilted her head, watching Daniel's reaction closely. Her silver eyes caught the hallway light, reflecting it like mirrors. "You weren't supposed to see this," she whispered. Daniel's mouth was dry. "Then you should have stayed outside." The words came out harsher than he intended, but his fear needed somewhere to go. He wanted answers, and he wanted them now. She glanced back toward the bathroom. The steam still lingered, swirling in the air. "The water. It reacts to me. Always has." "I thought I could hide it," Daniel shook his head. "Reacts? What are you talking about? You're glowing. People don't glow." "I'm not people," she said simply. The calmness in her voice only made Daniel more uneasy. She said it the way someone might say the sky is blue. No hesitation. No doubt. Daniel backed up a step. His apartment suddenly felt too small, too close. The walls pressed in on him. "Then what are you?" She hesitated. For the first time, her expression cracked. Not fear exactly, but conflict, as if she wasn't sure whether to speak the truth. Finally, she said, "I am a traveler. From very far, not from this place you call Earth." Daniel let out a nervous laugh, though it sounded shaky. "You're telling me you're an alien? That's insane." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice remained steady. "Insane, yet here I stand." Daniel opened his mouth to argue, but he had no words. The evidence was right in front of him. Her eyes, her voice, the glowing marks, the strange way the air seemed to hum when she spoke in that unknown language. None of it was human. None of it could be explained. He ran a hand through his hair. "Why here? Why me? Out of all doors you came to mine." "Because you opened it," she repeated softly. "And because I was running out of time." Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. Running from who? Her gaze shifted toward the window, the blinds rattling softly as a car passed outside. She lowered her voice. "Hunters. They know I am here. They will not stop." The word hunters settled heavy in Daniel's mind. He pictured faceless figures, shadows with weapons, things that didn't belong in his city. His stomach twisted. "Look," he said, his voice trembling, "I don't want trouble. If people or whatever they are after you, I can't help. I'm not a fighter. I'm just me." She studied him for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, her damp hair clinging to her face, her glowing eyes locked on his. "Yet you let me in. That makes you more dangerous than you think." Daniel swallowed hard. "Dangerous? I'm nobody," she tilted her head, almost curious. "That is why you matter. Hunters look for power, but kindness is harder to see. It can hide in small places. Like here." Daniel didn't know what to say. Her words made no sense, but they carried a strange weight, as if she believed them completely. The pipes in the bathroom groaned suddenly, making him jump. The light flickered again. The apartment seemed restless, like it could feel the presence of something unnatural inside it. She turned her head sharply toward the window, her eyes narrowing. "They are closer." Daniel's chest tightened. "How do you know?" "The air changes. The sound bends. My kind can sense them." Daniel stepped back, shaking his head. "This is insane. This is too much." She reached out, placing her cold hand on his arm. The glowing marks lit faintly against his skin, and he flinched at the strange warmth they carried. "Daniel," she said, speaking his name for the first time. "You do not understand yet, but you will. Tonight decides if I live or if we both fall." His heart raced at her words. We both? He hadn't agreed to anything.
He hadn't asked for this.
He just wanted his noodles, his quiet night, his boring life. But now, a glowing alien woman was standing in his apartment, hunted by enemies he couldn't even imagine. He pulled his arm away. No, I didn't sign up for this. You need to leave, now." Her eyes softened, almost sad. "If I leave, they will still come. They will find me. And they will see you. You opened the door. That ties you to me. Daniel's stomach dropped. He felt trapped. No matter what he did, the danger was already inside. The hallway light flickered again, harder this time. A low vibration passed through the floor. So faint he wondered if it was only in his head, but her eyes widened. She had felt it too. They're near, she whispered. Daniel's chest rose and fell quickly. His apartment was no longer safe. His life was no longer simple. And as he looked into her glowing eyes, he realized the night was only beginning. The chase outside. The floor trembled again, stronger this time. Daniel thought it might be a truck passing outside, but the look on her face told him otherwise. Her silver eyes darted toward the window, then to the door. Every line in her body grew sharp, tense like a wild animal about to run. "They found me," she whispered. Daniel's throat went dry. Who found you?" Before she could answer, the apartment window rattled hard. A sharp crack split the glass in the corner, thin like a spider web. Daniel jumped back, his heart slamming against his ribs. The street outside looked quiet, but the air felt wrong, too heavy like a storm building with no clouds. The woman moved fast. She grabbed Daniel's wrist with surprising strength, pulling him away from the window. "No more questions. We leave now." "What?" "No, this is my home." His protest was weak, almost childish. He knew he couldn't fight her grip. She turned to him, her face fierce. "Home is nothing if you are dead." Her words cut deep. Daniel had no time to argue. The crack in the window spread, crawling like ice across the glass. Then, faintly, Daniel saw shadows moving outside. Not people, too tall, too thin, their steps too smooth. They didn't walk. They glided. A low hum filled the air, vibrating in Daniel's bones. He covered his ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't in the room. It was inside his head. "Move," she ordered. Daniel stumbled as she pulled him toward the fire escape at the end of the hall. She yanked the rusted window open, climbed out barefoot, and motioned for him to follow. Daniel hesitated, staring back at his apartment, his couch, his noodles, his life, all shrinking into something that felt suddenly meaningless. Then he saw the shadows closing in, and panic shoved him forward. The night air was cold as he climbed onto the fire escape. The metal groaned under his weight. The woman moved with inhuman speed, her wet hair whipping behind her as she descended. Daniel scrambled after her, his hand slipping on the cold railing. Below, the alley stretched out, dark, narrow, littered with trash cans and broken bottles. Neon signs from the street flickered faintly in the distance. The hum grew louder. Daniel risked a glance upward. His breath caught. Above him, 3 shapes slid past the cracked window of his apartment. Their bodies were cloaked in darkness, but faint lights pulsed across their skin like living circuits. Their heads turned unnaturally, scanning the room with glowing eyes. Hunters. Daniel's legs shook as he climbed down faster. The woman leapt from the last railing to the ground, landing silently. She looked up at him. "Jump!" He didn't think. He let go. His feet hit the ground hard, pain shooting up his ankles, but he stayed upright. She grabbed his arm and pulled him deeper into the alley. Behind them, the fire escape groaned again. The hunters had found the window. "Run," she whispered. Daniel ran. His lungs burned, his chest tight, but fear gave him speed. Trash cans toppled as they pushed through, rats scattering. The woman never slowed, her grip like iron on his arm. The alley opened onto a street alive with neon. Cars passed, people laughed outside bars, music thumped from open doors. Daniel almost cried with relief at the sight of normal life. But then he saw the shadows behind them. The hunters slipped into the street, tall and wrong, their glowing lines shifting across their bodies. No one noticed. The humans around them laughed and smoked and drank, blind to the predators in their midst. Daniel gasped. "They don't see them?" "They can't," she said sharply. "Not unless the hunters want to be seen." Daniel's stomach flipped. The crowd was useless. He and the woman were alone in this. She yanked him into another side street narrower than the last. The hum faded for a moment, replaced by the sound of their ragged breathing. Daniel bent over, clutching his side. I can't keep up." She turned to him, eyes fierce. "You must." Stopping his death. He wanted to argue, to scream at her, but the look in her glowing eyes silenced him. She wasn't being cruel. She was telling the truth. A crash echoed from behind them. The hunters had found their trail. The woman pulled something from her torn clothing. At first, Daniel thought it was a piece of metal. Then it unfolded, glowing faintly like liquid light forming a shape. A weapon. Stay behind me, she said. Daniel froze. Wait, you can fight them? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Fight? No, delay, the word chilled him. Delay meant they weren't safe. Delay meant escape was still uncertain. The hum returned, vibrating through the walls of the alley. Daniel's ears rang. The shadows grew longer, stretching unnaturally across the ground. The woman raised the glowing weapon, her marks pulsing brighter. When I tell you, run, do not look back. Daniel wanted to argue, but his voice wouldn't come. He could only nod, his heart hammering. The shadows at the end of the alley solidified. 3 tall figures stepped forward, their eyes burning like cold fire. They made no sound, but the air twisted around them, heavy and sharp. The woman stood tall, weapon ready. Daniel crouched behind her, shaking, his breath shallow. The hunters stopped, watching, calculating. And then, the night exploded. The truth about the $3. The alley was smoke and echoes. The fight had ended in chaos. The glowing weapon had burst like light against the hunters, scattering them for a moment, enough to escape. Daniel's chest still heaved as he stumbled through another back street, his legs aching, his throat raw. The woman walked ahead, calm despite her ragged appearance. Her glowing marks had dimmed again, fading back into faint lines on her skin. She looked weaker now, as if the weapon had drained her. Daniel finally stopped, leaning against a brick wall, gasping for breath. I can't keep going. I can't. She turned, her face unreadable. You must. They are not gone. Only delayed. His knees shook. He wanted to collapse right there. I don't understand any of this. What do they want? Who are you? And what's with the $3? For the first time, she paused. Her silver eyes softened and she walked closer. Slowly, she reached into the pocket of her torn clothes and pulled out the same crumpled bills. She unfolded them carefully as though they were priceless. Daniel frowned. It's just money, useless. You can't buy safety with $3. Her gaze lingered on the paper. Not money. Not to me. She crouched down, holding the bills between them. On my world, there is a word. A word that means my last chance, my last hope. When I tried to translate it, your machines gave me this, $3. I thought, perhaps it was close enough. Daniel blinked. Wait, you're saying, when you said you only had $3, I meant I only had one hope left. Her voice was soft, almost sad. One fragile chance. The air between them felt heavy. Daniel stared at the worn bills in her hand. They weren't a joke, and they weren't a payment. They were a symbol, a desperate mistake in language. He shook his head. Why me, then? Why risk coming to some stranger's door? Her silver eyes studied him closely. Because you're kind. You humans. Sometimes you show kindness with nothing to gain. That is rare. That is powerful. Daniel gave a bitter laugh. You're wrong. Most people wouldn't have opened the door. I almost didn't. But you did, she said firmly. And that changes everything. He fell silent, her words sinking deep. She was right. Something inside him had pushed him to open that door. He didn't know why, but it mattered now. The night wind rustled through the alley. Daniel rubbed his arms, still cold from fear. So those things chasing you, hunters you called them. Why do they want you? Her expression darkened. She sat down on the broken step nearby, her shoulders heavy. My people are divided. Some follow freedom. Some follow chains. I chose freedom. That makes me a traitor to them. Chains? Daniel asked quietly. They conquer worlds. They bend others to their will. If I return, they use me as proof. They will say no one escapes. That fear spreads faster than war. Daniel's stomach twisted. So you're running. And Earth is just, what? A hiding place? She nodded faintly. For now. But if they capture me here, Earth becomes the battlefield. The thought made Daniel sick. His small apartment, his city, his world, dragged into something it wasn't ready for. He sank down onto the step beside her. Then what do we do? He asked, his voice trembling. She looked at him strangely. We? Yes, we. Daniel snapped, surprising himself. You brought them here. You knocked on my door. Now they're hunting me too, aren't they? Her silver eyes flickered, unreadable. Yes, you are tied now. The moment you chose me. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Great, just great. Silence stretched between them. The hum of distant traffic mixed with the faint ringing in Daniel's ears from the hunter's sound. Finally, he lifted his head. So all this started with a mistaken translation? $3. She gave the smallest smile. Sometimes mistakes carry truth. It was my last hope, and you answered it. Daniel felt a strange weight lift in his chest. The words still scared him, but they also made him stand straighter. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He had made a choice. The woman tucked the bills carefully back into her pocket like a sacred object. Then she stood, her eyes narrowing toward the end of the alley. They are still close. We must keep moving, Daniel groaned, pushing himself up. His body ached, but fear kept his legs working. Where? We can't just run forever. She glanced upward, her gaze fixed on the stars barely visible through the city haze. Somewhere high, somewhere they cannot surround us so easily. Daniel followed her eyes. His stomach dropped. Don't tell me you mean the rooftops, her faint smile returned. You learn quickly. He groaned again. This night is going to kill me. But as she reached out her hand, glowing faintly under the streetlight, Daniel realized something. He had gone from noodles and silence to glowing hunters and fugitives, and yet deep inside, part of him felt more alive than ever before. The truth of the $3 burned in his mind. It wasn't about money. It was about chance. And now, he was part of that chance. As they slipped back into the shadows, Daniel understood. He was no longer running for himself. He was running for her, and maybe for the world too. The battle of choice. The city stretched out below, alive with neon and noise, but on the rooftop where Daniel and the woman crouched, everything felt silent. The wind whipped against his face, sharp and cold, tugging at his clothes. His chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath, sweat clinging to his skin. He wasn't built for this kind of running, this kind of fear. The woman knelt near the edge, scanning the streets below with those strange silver eyes. The faint glow of her markings had returned, lighting her arms with soft blue lines. She looked calm, too calm, as if danger was her normal world. They will come again, she said quietly. They never stop, Daniel groaned. His legs trembled, his lungs burned, and his hands shook. Then what's the point of running? We can't keep this up. Not forever. Her eyes flicked toward him. Forever is not needed. Only long enough, he stared at her. Long enough for what? She hesitated, her gaze drifting to the sky. For them to give up. Or for me to die. Daniel's chest tightened. That's not a plan. That's suicide. Her face remained still, but her voice softened. Better me than this world. The words hit him hard. He thought of his apartment, his city, the people walking below without a clue of the danger hovering above them. She was right. If these hunters were real, then the stakes were bigger than just her. Bigger than him, but fear gnawed at his stomach. He wanted to walk away, to go back to his quiet life and pretend none of this had happened. Yet every time he looked at her glowing arms, at the strange strength in her silver eyes, something inside him whispered, "You can't turn back now." The rooftop groaned faintly, metal pipes vibrating under their weight. Daniel frowned. What's that sound? Her head snapped toward the far edge. Her marks flared brighter. They are here. Daniel's blood ran cold. He spun toward the sound. At the far corner of the rooftop, shadows stretched unnaturally long, bending against the moonlight. The hunters were climbing, their tall forms sliding up the side of the building without effort. The hum began again, rattling through Daniel's skull. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head. I can't make it stop. The woman stood firm, her voice steady despite the pressure in the air. Focus on me, Daniel. Ignore the hum. They want your mind broken. Do not give it to them. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut. Her voice cut through the noise, grounding him. He forced himself to breathe, to keep his head up. When he opened his eyes again, the hunters were on the rooftop, 3 tall figures glowing faintly with pulsing lines across their bodies. Their faces were smooth, their movements unnatural like machines wearing flesh. The woman raised her weapon again, the liquid light folding into her hand. She stood tall, unshaken. Go, she shouted at Daniel. Find another way down. But Daniel couldn't move. His body screamed to run, but his heart stayed frozen. If he left, she would be alone. She would fight 3 monsters with nothing but a glowing blade. No, he said, his voice low at first. Then louder, no, I'm not leaving. Her eyes flashed toward him, surprised. You cannot fight them. Then I'll die trying. Daniel snapped, his fists clenched. The hunters advanced, their movements slow but unstoppable. The hum grew louder, cracking through the air like invisible thunder. Daniel grabbed a broken pipe lying on the rooftop. It was heavy, rusted, useless compared to their glowing bodies, but it was all he had. He stepped forward, standing beside her. His knees shook, but he forced himself to stay upright. The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. Then for the first time she nodded. "Then we fight together." The hunters lunged, the rooftop exploded into chaos. The woman's glowing weapon cut through the air, slicing light against shadow. Sparks flew where it met the hunter's limbs. Daniel swung his pipe wildly, missing more often than hitting, but every strike was fueled by raw fear and stubbornness. One hunter turned toward him, its glowing eyes locking onto his. Daniel's stomach dropped, but he swung anyway. The pipe clanged against its arm with a hollow sound. The creature staggered. Not much, but enough. The woman leapt between them, her blade flaring bright, slashing across the hunter's chest. It screeched, a sound that made Daniel's teeth ache. Another hunter grabbed her from behind, pulling her off balance. Daniel's instincts roared. He rammed the pipe into the creature's side with all his strength. The impact barely dented it, but it gave her the moment to twist free and stab upward, her blade piercing its shoulder. She landed beside Daniel, her breaths sharp but steady. "You are reckless," she muttered. "Yeah," Daniel gasped, gripping the pipe tighter, but it worked. The last hunter loomed over them, taller than the others, its glow brighter. Daniel's arms ached, his chest burned, but he raised the pipe again. He wasn't leaving her. Not now. The hum grew to a deafening roar, shaking the rooftop. The woman's markings lit brighter, glowing like fire along her arms. She shouted something in her strange language, her voice echoing against the night sky. The hunters staggered, their movements faltering. Daniel didn't understand the words, but he felt the power. He rushed forward, swinging his pipe one last time. It connected with the weakened hunter, and she struck at the same moment, her blade piercing its core. The rooftop fell silent. The hunters dissolved into fragments of light, fading into the wind. The hum was gone. The night was still again. Daniel collapsed to his knees, the pipe clattering beside him. His chest heaved, his whole body trembling. She stood over him, her weapon dimming back into a shard of metal. "You chose," she said softly. "You stayed." Daniel looked up at her, sweat dripping down his face. "What choice did I have?" Her silver eyes glimmered, the kind only humans make. To fight when they should run. To stand when they should fall. That is why they fear you. Daniel didn't know if he had won or lost, but he knew one thing for sure. He had chosen her side, and there was no turning back. Humans fight back. The rooftop smelled of smoke and metal. Shards of glowing dust floated in the air where the hunters had vanished, dissolving slowly into nothing. Daniel sat on the ground, chest heaving, arms shaking from exhaustion. The rusted pipe lay beside him, bent and useless. His whole body hurt, but his heart pounded with something stronger than pain. He was still alive. The woman stood at the edge of the rooftop, her glowing blade dimming back into a shard of metal. Her silver eyes scanned the city, sharp and restless. Her markings flickered faintly like fading fire. "They will return," she said quietly. "More of them. Stronger ones," Daniel groaned, rubbing his aching arms. "Great, I can barely handle one. What are we supposed to do against more?" Her gaze shifted back to him. "You surprise me, human. You were not built for this, yet you stood." Daniel gave a weak laugh. "I didn't exactly have a choice, did I?" Her lips curved just slightly. "There is always a choice. Most would run. You stayed." Daniel looked down at his trembling hands. He didn't feel brave. He felt like a man who had been dragged into a nightmare. But her words sank in, heavy and strange. Maybe he had done something more than just survive. The night air grew colder. Daniel shivered, pulling his jacket tighter. "So what now? We just wait for them to come back and finish the job?" She stepped closer, crouching so her eyes met his. "No, we make them afraid," Daniel blinked. "Afraid of us? Are you serious?" "Yes," she said simply. "Hunters think only of power. They cannot understand something else, human stubbornness. Humans fight even when they should not. That makes you dangerous." Daniel shook his head, laughing bitterly. "You're giving me too much credit. I'm not a soldier. I'm not even strong. I'm just a guy who couldn't finish his noodles." She tilted her head, studying him. "And yet you swung a broken pipe at a creature that could tear you apart. That is what they fear. Not strength. Not weapons. The choice to fight anyway." Her words lit a fire in his chest. He still didn't believe he could change anything, but he wanted to believe she was right. Before he could reply, a low vibration shook the rooftop. The sound was faint but growing. The hunters were coming again. The woman stood tall, her markings flaring back to life. They returned. Daniel forced himself to stand, legs shaking. Then we need a plan. Running won't cut it anymore. She nodded slowly. Then we fight like humans. With tricks. With traps. With the ground itself. Daniel's mind raced. He thought of the rooftops, the wires, the junk scattered across the city. Hunters might be strong, but they didn't know this place. He did. All right, he said, his voice steadying. Let's make them regret coming here. Together they moved quickly. Daniel tore loose wires from broken vents, dragged heavy pipes to the edges, and stacked old crates near the rooftop exit. The woman worked beside him, her hands glowing faintly as she shaped bits of metal into sharp edges. The hum grew louder. Shadows stretched across the rooftop again. 3 new hunters emerged from the darkness, taller, stronger, their glowing lines brighter. Their eyes locked on Daniel and the woman, unblinking. Daniel's heart pounded. Fear clawed at his chest, but he pushed it down. Ready? He muttered. She lifted her glowing shard. Ready. The hunters advanced. Daniel kicked the first crate, sending it crashing into one of the creatures. The hunter staggered, not expecting the crude attack. The woman leapt forward, her blade slicing across its arm, sparks flying. Another hunter lunged. Daniel swung his pipe again, this time not at the creature but at the rooftop's loose wiring. Sparks exploded and the hunter reeled back as electricity crawled over its glowing skin. The woman shouted something in her strange language, her markings flaring bright. She moved like light itself, striking fast, every motion sharp and perfect. Daniel fought clumsily beside her, using pipes, wires, and even broken bricks, anything he could grab. The rooftop became chaos, light, sparks, and crashing metal. The hunters were strong, faster than anything Daniel had ever seen. But they weren't ready for human unpredictability. They weren't ready for desperation turned into courage. One hunter cornered Daniel, its tall frame looming over him. He had nothing left in his hands, no weapon. No escape. The woman's voice cut through the air. Fight, Daniel. Something inside him snapped. He grabbed the nearest object, a broken antenna, and rammed it upward with all his strength. The sharp end pierced the hunter's chest, sending it stumbling backward. The woman finished it with a slash of her blade. The remaining hunters hesitated. Just for a moment, but Daniel saw it. Doubt. They weren't used to prey fighting back. They weren't used to losing. The woman's silver eyes burned bright. She stepped forward, her voice fierce. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them humans do not bow. The hunters hissed, their glowing lines flickering. Then slowly they stepped back. One by one they vanished into the shadows, retreating into the night. Silence fell again. Daniel collapsed to the ground, panting, every muscle screaming in pain. The woman knelt beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Her touch was cold but steady. You see now, she whispered. This is why they fear your kind. Not your strength, not your weapons, but this, your refusal to break. Daniel laughed weakly, shaking his head. I'm not fearless. I was terrified the whole time. She smiled faintly. Fear is not weakness. Fear is proof you are alive, and still you chose to fight. Daniel stared at the city lights below, glowing against the night. For the first time he felt something strange, pride. He had fought not because he was strong, but because he couldn't walk away. The woman stood looking out over the city. This is only the beginning. They will come again. But now they know. Daniel pushed himself up, groaning. Yrsa, and what do they know? She looked back at him, her silver eyes shining. That humans fight back, Daniel managed a tired smile. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing. Tonight he had earned the right to stand beside her, and the hunters would never forget it.